You might want to let your friends know that if they weren't part of the Great Awakening, they're probably going to be a part of the Rude Awakening. If you saw the video a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about that school that generated the picture of the eagle snatching the baby out of the crib and how it was viral and it convinced people that it was real even though it was fake. And then if you tap into postmodernism experiments on society, so you run just a basic example or test or experiment to try out postmodernism on an unsuspecting population that doesn't know how to defend against it, or even that postmodernism is being deconstruction is being used against it. And I know some of you are going to say, no, you're not explaining it right. Yeah, okay, fine. But you know you were running a trick on people. But the point of this is, if you run this experiment on people and it's so successful and they are so confused by it, and you've been able to completely reverse the meaning of words, concepts, and reality itself, the duper's delight that they experience, they're going to want to do it over and over again. And that's kind of what we've been seeing the last 10 years, is a nonstop duping of society. But I don't even think it started there, because as I mentioned in previous videos, imagine being on the team that made the pet rock, and through the marketing campaign, through the advertising, through utilizing the special tactics of running advertising, they gave us acronyms. I don't specifically remember the acronyms anymore. I remember it was SIMPLE. It was an acronym, SIMPLE. So the S was like for security. The I'm just going to go off the top of my head. One of it had to do with like personal security, but the rest had to do with like fulfilling your ego. So it was a social status, keeping up, getting rank, showing off, the sex appeal. I forgot. There was a formula, and I didn't believe you could actually do this upon an audience, especially if they were in the class. But then once I graduated, I started listening to radio for the first time, and I'm like, wow, yeah, okay, here comes that. They just use the formula in these commercials. So now, imagine you do this, and you successfully shifted what reality is for people. And that's the part where I talk about attitudes and behaviors. These two concepts they tried to train us on in the media training, but I was too young and naive to understand the implications of it. So manufacturing attitudes and behaviors, you could even see it right now with AI. So right now with AI, every faction is wrong. So one of the attitudes that is being manufactured is everybody's trying to figure out how to make money off it and how to learn more than the next guy so you could screw the next guy out of the AI money. And I guess that's what business is. You want to learn everything so that you could beat the next guy. But when it comes to AI, it's a little bit more sinister. So you got those guys that want to learn it to conquer everybody else instead of finding the abundance in it. Because the AI it creates an abundance. Well, it creates no need for everybody. Anyway, so there's that attitude and behavior. Is the little clever guy that wants to beat everybody to the punch. But another attitude is the people that are like, I don't even want to use ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is just one of them. You know, there's Midjourney. There's all different types. But there's the people that just avoid it altogether, the head in the sander. Now, my exercise of talking about this is not to talk about AI. It's to talk about how behaviors and attitudes get created. Because those are key ways that perception gets manufactured. So here's one for you. Over the last year and a half, the establishment has been propping up Ron DeSantis and then creating whispering campaigns of, oh yeah, Trump's too old, or actually they're using this one, oh, Trump is so 2015, to craft this perception that, oh yeah, Trump was great, but he's 2015. It's tired. We're over it now. It's passe, and so it's a multi-level. They like, we'll give you everything you want, everything you like about Trump. Here's the approved. Ron DeSantis is the approved version of Donald Trump. You can't have Donald Trump, but hey, look, we got Ron DeSantis. You could have Ron DeSantis. He's just like Trump, but you can't have. But here you go. Look, Ron DeSantis does the woke. He's against the woke agenda. Look, he stopped Disney World. He's so tough. And now I like Ron DeSantis, but I don't like being manipulated. But even worse than the manipulation, whisper campaigns which generate attitudes. And it's fine if that's the thing. But then when I see people repeat the attitudes and the behaviors, that's where I'm like, you guys are being manipulated and you don't even know it. But that's a manufacturing of the attitude. Oh yeah, Ron DeSantis, he's cool. Donald Trump, passe. And actually in any primary campaign, oh, well, you can't vote for that person. He can't win. No, he can't win. You got to vote for the person I tell you to vote for. But as I've told you many times before, when I say none of this is real, it's that everything is a manufactured perception. To get an idea, to know how pervasive this is and intentional. This isn't me theorizing. This isn't me generalizing. The few times I've worked in the actual industry, the idea of presenting actual reality to people was the furthest objective. It wasn't even on the objective sheet. To manufacture an illusion, to shift perception, to create a completely false narrative and get the audience to believe it. That was the key objective. And to the point where I wondered, is there like a bonus? Is there like an incentivized bonus structure that if you can successfully convince 30% of the population such and such, then you get this prize? Because think about, over the years, we always see polls like, 50% of the American population now believes that extraterrestrials are real. 35% of the population think Joe Biden's doing good or bad. So all these polls always happen, and you wonder who's conducting these polls. And then you realize you could just pull the stuff out of nowhere. Because is it going to get fact checked? Well, if it gets fact checked, then what source did the polling? Also, evidence. That's another big thing. So a lot of people, I was just watching a video Pelosi was talking about, we need to do evidence-based discussions. Evidence according to who and to whose standards. And that's not to sound philosophical. In school, in like middle school, high school, college, we had to cite authoritative sources. And in present day, the fact checkers go to their authoritative sources. And their authoritative sources are things like New York Times and CNN. And the other part is, who granted the AP and Reuters godlike powers to dictate reality? Do you know that AP and Reuters, like whatever they say is the truth? Is the truth? But even in evidence, when you look at the way evidence is set up and the way it's scored, the establishment team can always declare, your evidence is no evidence, and our evidence is authoritative evidence. So if you're someone that's hiding behind that, it's a problem. Now, some of the people that do stick to evidence and data and sources, they come from situations where I understand some of them, where they lived with people that were just purely mystical and not empirical, and just believed any crazy cockamamie idea that came up. Okay, so I can understand why those people would be ultra science, because if you're just dealing with superstitious mysticalness without any balance, that's no good. So I'm not saying be all the way mystical or all the way science. I'm saying be balanced. But most people either want to be all the way one or all the way other. Another issue that I used to see over the years, and I still see it to this day, once somebody breaks free from the news, spoon feeding of fake narratives and fake reality, they then dive headfirst into alternative media and just believe alternative media and conspiracy theory as complete spoon-fed fact without any discernment of asking where the agenda is, whose angle is this, and they went from swallowing the fake news to swallowing crazy tinfoil. Now, a lot of tinfoil is based on reality, and obviously I'm thoroughly in on truthing. But simultaneously, I know that when the truth gets out, and this is a key concept here, if the truth should ever get out, and it's very rare that it does, but should it get out, immediately the response is to muddy the waters by flooding the marketplace with alternate, completely false conspiracy theories to drown out the true one. Disinformation and misinformation in present day have a completely different usage than it did in the 90s. In the 90s, disinformation was intentional disinfo to muddy the waters, to confuse the few amounts of true conspiracies that got out there. So for instance, and there's a great meme about this, to get an idea on what I'm talking about, let's look at the assassination of JFK. There are so many different angles to it. You know, if you don't accept the programming of, oh, it was Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone gunman, then it's like, oh, well, who did it? Oh, well, it was the Russians. It was the Cubans. It was the Soviets, the Russians. It was the mafia. It was George H.W. Bush. It was the people that control the central bank. It was this group. It was that group. Every group had a claim to who did it. Same with the 2001 New York event. There was the original event, then there was some conspiracy theories, and then it got flooded with stuff that got so crazy. The thermal nanite and the holograms and the no plane theory and the missile theory, and there's so many different, the controlled demolition. And I'm not saying that none of these are true. I'm just saying this is, I'm not trying to talk about the specific event. I'm talking about this tactic where they muddy the waters and flood it with all these different things. There is also the tactic of the replacement story. So I'm not going to pronounce it right, but Pedugate, when that hit, the replacement by the TV, and I'm going to mispronounce this, was Pizzagate. Okay? So they replaced Pedugate with Pizzagate. All right? And they staged the little Comet Ping Pong event and used that and said, see, and they had the guy supposed to get shot. See what happens? You see what happens when you let conspiracy theory run wild? This is what happens. And then everybody believes that. But anyway, imagine if you pulled off a mass hoax on the population. What is there to stop you from doing it again? Another idea is that once I saw reality TV come out, I thought, okay, well, now if everybody could be famous, what are the celebrities going to do? Well, if they have access to the alternate reality game and they have money to put on the billboards, they could create their own fake realities to perpetuate on the population and have you believe it. You know, you wonder about Entertainment Tonight, all the celebrity gossip, all the divorces and all this. I don't even watch any of it, but I know that it's all going on. And I often wonder, is any of this real? And the reason why I say that, and this is a story I probably told, it's an important one because this concept changed me. So Howard Bloom, he's the author of the Lucifer Principle. He claims that he was an A&R guy. He claims that he invented rap and heavy metal and the 1980s and that he managed Michael Jackson at one point. But he said in an interview with George Norrie that when Michael Jackson was at his peak with Thriller, there was a newspaper called the Boston, not the Boston Globe, but a local Massachusetts newspaper, ran Michael Jackson as the headline story because he was performing in Massachusetts. And that local newspaper sold more copies than the Boston Globe or whatever the Boston big time newspaper is. And once these things happen in business, then that becomes the new template. And so then that's when the celebrity thing exploded. Now, it was happening before that with Marilyn Monroe and whatnot, but the Michael Jackson thing turned it into an industry. And so Bloom said that Michael Jackson's publicity team, from that day forth, there were newspapers requesting a story every single day forever after. And that his PR team would generate a new Michael Jackson story every single day from 1983 to the present at the time that he was doing the video. And he said, at the beginning, it was great how much publicity it was. There was always stories about Michael Jackson. He goes, but after you're like 6 years in, you run out of stories to tell. Like little, we already talked about the whole Jackson 5. We talked about all the animals that Michael likes. We talked about you go after 6 years, what else do you have? And he said, that's when we started creating things like the child stuff. So that's publicity. That's another part to know too, is a publicity campaign. You intentionally manufacture a fake controversy that's polarizing, and that's how you publicize whatever you're publicizing. A great example is when The Sopranos came out with like season 4 or 6 or 8, whichever season it was. They created this controversy of, is The Sopranos family entertainment? And they ran with that, and all the radio stations were talking about it. And this is when I started to pick up on it, because like every radio show was asking the same question: is The Sopranos family entertainment? And it sounds like it's a negative thing because you could have negative angles to it and positive. But all publicity is good publicity. Another great example, Applied Digital Solutions. They're a company that makes implantable microchips into humans. So now to create the awareness of it, and this is back in 2001, to create the awareness of it, they themselves would create news articles about the controversy of implantable microchips. But it would be the already known controversy of, the fear of implantable microchips. And then, so it would address that fear at the beginning and then go on to state the benefits of it. So then you're like, it's appearing to be objective, but this is a press release disguised to be an actual story. And then there was a book we had to read. It was called Media Techniques, Corporate Media, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there was a statistic in the book that said 70% of all news stories are actually paid press release campaigns, cleverly disguised to appear as news. So that means 7 out of 10 articles that you read, they look like they're actual articles, but they're ads. One of the things that's not explicitly stated but implied in 1984 by George Orwell is that the role of the historian isn't to preserve history, as you would think it is. The role of the historian is to make sure that the narrative of history is consistent with whatever the party needs it to say to advance whatever their current thing is. And so that means tossing some stuff down the memory hole and manufacturing things that didn't previously exist. And just throughout our own time, there was revisionist history. And revisionist historians, they claim that they have the authority because they're claiming that they're fixing a prejudiced version of history or an inaccurate or whatever. Now, what's really happening is they're replacing one fake version of history with another fake version of history. So don't get fooled by either the first historian or the replacement historian. They're all creating fake narratives using artifacts, the art of making facts. And when I say that, if the art of making facts bothers you, just think about archaeology. You hear the stories of Zachariah Sitchin and Graham Hancock, and they're called pseudo-archaeologists. And not just them, a couple others. Now, yeah, sure, they are pseudo-archaeologists. Okay? But what's to say that the non-pseudo-archaeologist isn't just, oh, here's an old pottery. This means that they were hunters and gatherers, or they knew how to agriculture. They just make this stuff up. We granted them permission to invent the stories of history with their evidence being artifacts. And half the time, you wonder if the artifacts are even real. Could they have just buried them? Because when I say they could just bury these things and then go dig them up, people are like, what kind of conspiracy theory? And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty convenient that they figured out the exact location these things are that they need to dig up. Think about how many times you've tried to dig something up and you never find anything. Oh, well, you don't have all the techniques of spectroscopy and all. Just start to consider it all. Also, regardless of what anybody, even the truthers, I love Tartarian conspiracy theory. I love it. And I approach Tartarian conspiracy theory the same way I approach FE. It's not to say that I believe the Tartarian conspiracy or that I believe FE, but there are things that get you to say, the point of FE is to say, hey man, the story they told you about outer space, it's probably not true. And once I tell you that, if you investigate it, you'll see it. And the point of Tartaria conspiracy theory, to me, it's not to say, oh, there was this great Tartarian empire that was erased from the history books. It's simply to say, hey, did you ever notice that a lot of the history just doesn't add up? And, I mean, Sir Isaac Newton had a history book that was banned. And then another guy with the Phantom Time. And there's a lot of people throughout history that had issue with the actual version of history. And then you think of things like, gee, I read in college these Aristotle books and books by Plato. And Plato sure talked about Atlantis, and Aristotle talked about the ancients. And if Aristotle's the ancient, who the heck were the ancients before that? And then you have the stories of the moon, the people that were here before the moon was here. And I'm not saying that any of this is even true. It's just these are all the dots that connect. And I put it all in my head, and I'm like, yeah, man, I think that story of history is, that thing just doesn't quite add up. But yeah, now that they completed their OpenAI, maybe that's why they restored the ability for the rest of us to communicate again. Elon unbanned everybody's account. Because now that they got their data set, far-right positions won't taint their desired child that they're trying to produce that's nice and pure and establishment and atheist and globalist and not get infected by a nationalist and other types of ideas. And I'm not even any of these factions. I'm the truth faction, and right now the truth is on the side of the right. It wasn't always on the side of the right, especially during the W. Bush administration. So, yeah, I'm on the side of truth, and the comedians have all kind of shifted to the right, even Bill Maher. So I'm not being far-fetched or polarizing here. I just want the truth. I don't care who brings it. I'm loving these independents like Tulsi Gabbard, although you could say Tulsi's part of the World Economic Forum, whatever. But just this idea of we're starting to get to the point where people are like, hey, we need to break down these silos. We need to exit the echo chambers and find out how all of us got manipulated. All of us did. And we all got divided, and it's to their advantage. So I'm like, there's a good psychological operation taking place right now. I'm seeing a lot of unity from all different angles now. Whereas all we've been watching is division. So is the unity a co-op or a psyop as well? It's a good psyop. It's just that is the psyop co-opted? Are the bad guys doing this to us with an ulterior motive? I don't know. I'm against manipulation. I push the idea of anti-artificial scarcity, choosing my life in another dimension. And the suppressed technology is part of the artificial scarcity. I'm trying to be as open as possible to promote this idea of revealing your hand. I'm revealing my hand. I am an open book. I'm not using tactics. If I'm over pronunciating, it's because I want to effectively communicate what I am saying. I don't want to leave anything up to interpretation. I want to make sure that you understand exactly what I want you to understand. I'm not vague. I'm anti-obscurantant. I want everything to be so obvious, so out there, so plain to see. I mean, metaphors and all that are cool, but the legalese, I want, there's Google Translate that could translate languages. Someone needs to create a translator for legalese. So you push the legalese in and it outputs to you what it means in English. All right, I just found some extra notes on my iPad here. So why are they trying to limit our movement, especially as we are getting close to unlimited energy? I would love to know if there was a way to nonstop transmit the travel to Antarctica and continuously live stream if something should happen. All right, so what we're saying here is find a way to have the ability to live stream all the way to Antarctica from, I guess, leaving Argentina or Australia and being able to live stream yourself all the way to Antarctica so that if something happens, where you get approached by some group to turn around, we could at least get it captured on video and for everybody to see. Chances are it's probably going to... I think there was a video where somebody did try that and they did get turned around. It's pretty interesting. What are they hiding? But you have to show the hand. You have to actually go there and do it, bring the footage back to prove it so that people don't say, oh, you guys are crazy. There's cruises all the time. But then again, if you get to Antarctica, that's only half the battle. It's clearing the ice wall and then going for miles and miles. So the trip to Antarctica is not the quest. It's getting beyond the ice wall, and there's no gas stations. You need to have unlimited energy to be able to do it. But I guess if they ever did release the unlimited, like a lot of people probably think that, oh yeah, the reason why the oil, the gas, the alternative energy is there is because the oil companies want to keep making their profits. And while that's probably partially true, it's really that they need to meter you so that you can't travel beyond where gas stations exist unless you bring your own oil tanker. Good luck, right? And even so, are you going to be able to get that oil tanker all the way up onto the ice? So the key is it's the metering, and the metering creates a boundary. And if you want to visualize this metering and this boundary, there's a movie called They Live. It stars Justin Timberlake. And all of those toll booths are barriers to entry, as well as metering and whatever that other word was that I used. So they keep us into our little grids, and they're trying to even restrict travel even more. And the idea is, I guess, if the unlimited energy comes out, they can't allow you to just get in an airplane and travel forever, because then you'll find all the additional lands. So they got to keep you with metered fuel. And the metered fuel also is what commoditizes it, so you can't afford to travel. But if you could get unlimited energy, that means you could travel unlimitedly. So that's the goal, is to get unlimited travel capability so we can find out what is at the great beyond. There's also the experiment of humanity learning about going into the individualism. The first artist to sign a painting. When I was in college learning about Western civilization, there was a period where individualism became a thing. And it was noted by the first artist to sign his name on a painting. That created the individual. I guess prior to that, everything was the collective. Now, for these types of events to happen and to stay, indicates to me that there is a hidden hand that governs humanity throughout. And what I mean by that is there's a gazillion YouTubers all talking about the four turnings as if it's a natural cause of events, a natural thing of humans. When I hear of the four turnings, I think like, wow, they have the engineering down pat to 4 generations that they recycle over and over again to keep humanity completely divided and under control. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell. No, not Gladwell. Whoever, I forgot the name, but the four turnings, it's a popular thing for people to think that they're so sharp for talking about. They're not. They're not sharp because they didn't figure out that they think it's a natural thing or some neat thing that this guy figured out. No. It's engineer. It's human behavior and engineering. It's not natural. But the point is that the individual, at some point, this hand said, let's see what the humans do if they're allowed to be thought of as individuals. It wasn't a great enlightenment moment. We were allowed to be individuals. But anyway, that's what I got. May the force be with you. Peace.